Hi, this is Malorian. This is the Orc Tactical Team again, and what we're going to be touching on is kind of like a quick little thing that's from one of the viewers there who's wanting to really touch on kind of the spam meta. So the idea there is you could have somebody say, like for his two examples, who takes a whole bunch of the Tomb King Sphinxes or takes a whole bunch of the Trolls and goes with Throg for the Warriors of Chaos. And of course the whole idea and why these go well, and I mean that you can apply this to other things like the ethereal spam or whatever it is, you're really just taking one unit going crazy, and the real problem for these guys is unless they have, you know, the counter to this, you get to the point where, you know, sure, like even with ethereal, you might have one guy with a magic weapon. Well, I got several units of ethereal. You can't stop all of us. Same thing with the Sphinxes. You might have one cannon, but there's 7 of us. Here we come type thing, right? So the real question is how do you handle this and how do you prepare for it? Well, I guess the biggest thing is that really, unless you're playing a larger size game, a lot of the times you can't plan for everything. It's just not possible. And so I mean, you could go and make sure that your own list has like everything kind of covered and all the bases like that to try and cover every single possible army list. But really, let's just be realistic. That's not possible. And between leadership bombs and whatever else have you, there's going to be something out there that's going to wreck your day. Now, the main thing is whenever you're facing one of these real spam type lists is that no matter what unit you look at, everything has a weakness. And so the main thing is to try and focus on that weakness. Now, some of these spam things actually go and get changed by the change in the meta. So before I go and I keep on going with those, let me talk about a little bit here about why some of these things aren't actually as dangerous as they might seem. Because when you first are making your army list and you're saying like, man, what if I face this? What if I face that? The main thing you have to also look at is that how was that spam going to deal with the current meta? And just because it's scary to your own army list, is it going to be scary to everyone? For example, when I'm ever going to a tournament, I don't bother taking magic weapons because of the ethereal spam. Why? Well, because if there's ever, you know, a demon army or a wood elf army or somebody who does take a number of magic weapons, these guys are screwed. And so they know going into the tournament, if you're a vampire count player, that man, if I ever face demons or these other things, I'm just dead. So I better not take this. And that's why the kind of meta actually kind of counters that spam. Now for the two in particular, the Sphinxes and the Trolls, these ones too are also being currently controlled by the actual meta. The first one, the Sphinxes, is that the meta is changing to have more war machines and more monsters cav, monsters infantry. Of course, the more cannons and more stone throwers you have, the more dead Sphinxes you have. And the other thing is, I mean, Sphinxes love to fight infantry, right? They get in there, they stamp them, they do thunder crushes, it's a great time. If they're fighting something else, like the demigriffs or the skull crushers, they don't get their thunder stomp. Their thunder crush isn't really going to do anything. Their regular attacks isn't going to do very much. And so what happens is that you just get in there with your attacks you have with the multiple from the mount or the rider. You put a few wounds on these guys and they just crumble away. You know, even if you're fighting a couple of Sphinxes at a time, your Skull Crusher unit or Demigriff unit should be able to handle them both at the same time just because they're not generating any wounds, any combat res. So really, I don't really think going into a tournament you need to be worrying about the actual Sphinx spam. For the Troll one, Trolls, their big thing is the whole leadership thing, right? Like, of course, they're amazing, but the issue is how you're going to actually control this. And so the number one thing you're going to have to do if you ever face this is just go kill Throg. Man, I know from running my Trolls that as soon as my general's dead, it's over. My Trolls are just going to fail their leadership 4 and do nothing. And so whenever you're facing a Throg army, just go kill Throg, right? You might have to sacrifice a big chunk of your army to go do that, but by doing that, the rest of the army just falls apart. It's kind of like watching the sci-fi movies where they go after the mothership, and as soon as the mothership goes down, all the other ships and drones are kind of like, power down and do nothing. It's exactly the same thing. I don't care if I'm sacrificing my entire unit of 500-point Black Orc horde in order to do it. As long as this happens, yay, I win. Now, of course, in a Throg type army, you could be having Throg and another general. Both of them kind of act the same way. The big difference here is that probably their other general is going to be something like the Demon Prince or something like that. And if he's going to be effective, he's going to be flying off. Now, of course, he gets into the whole thing of how do you kill a demon prince and do you have enough war machines, blah, blah, blah. But the other thing you need to do is draw that demon prince away, right? If he's the general, you're already going to be dealing with Throg one way. Get him off into a combat somewhere, make it look juicy, and get him over there and fighting. Get that bubble pulled away. Or at the same time, know that if you're against someone who won't be baited into this, knowing that, hey, I can actually push this envelope knowing he's not going to charge because he's going to be getting out of this bubble. So that's one of the biggest things you have to kind of do there, and where you can actually see the meta controlling itself. Because of people just knowing how to deal with that stuff now, and also with the big spells, right? You start seeing all the purple sun and all that stuff, which just takes trolls right off the table. So that's how the meta is going to be controlling these spams. Now, let's say that you're not lucky though, and the meta did not control the spam, and now you're forced facing it. Now this is going back to the point where I was saying you have to look for the weakness. If you're taking a regular type army and you're up against sphinxes, know that the weakness is just lots of attacks. If you do have a knight unit or something like this where it can't thunderstomp, wonderful. Send that off into whatever sphinx you can, right? The other thing you need to do is that if you have any unit that has multiple attacks, just get in there. You're going to be needing 6s to wound, but the more attacks you have, obviously the more 6s you're going to roll. And the thing has like no armor, right? The next thing you have to do when fighting something like a Sphinx spam is know that they work best when they're working together, right? The more Sphinxes they have in a combat, the less of a chance they're going to be losing combat, and then they won't crumble. And if they're not crumbling, you're going to have some trouble taking these guys down. So try and set up so that if you're going to be taking a charge, work those numbers knowing that only, out of these 2, one should get in, or whatever it is, right? Or try and force down one flank so that all the sphinxes on this side, you're not fighting yet until you deal with the 3 or 2 over here, right? That's really how you have to handle these things. Same thing if you're going with Throg. If it's like, well, I just don't have a good way of handling these things, what am I going to do? You have a general army, maybe you don't have Purple Sun. How are you going to be dealing with the troll spam? And really, again, it's all about then spreading out, knowing that they are leadership dependent, and what they would love to do is stay together in a tiny little group and just kick some butt. But if you spread across the entire board, well, all of a sudden you're going to have trolls that are leaving these bubbles. And the same thing too, if you have any redirectors, redirect these guys to the flanks so that once they're there, it's like, well, good for you. You just killed off a little, 50-point throwaway unit, and now you're going to be walking into the board edge for the rest of the game. Yeah, good for you. Until I flank you and just, destroy you type thing. So that's really, you have to handle these things. Of course, whenever you look at a book, somebody's going to try and span something. Just when you're making your army list, first of all, before you get too crazy worried about it, just realize that what's the current meta? Is the current meta going to be controlling this list so that I probably don't need to worry about it in my own army list? And then secondly, if you ever do face it inside of a regular game and you get unlucky and this comes up, take a second, look at the weakness, and try and decide how you're going to be attacking that weakness, because they're always there. So there you have it. Thanks for watching. And another big thing is that I'm going to be doing a big long one for the next one, talking about Bretonnians again, because obviously with the campaign coming up, I'm going to be talking a lot about them. So look forward to that. Bye.